Welcome, everyone, to episode 370 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Penteleresco. I write stuff in podcast 2. Today, Travis Hanson joins the podcast. Now, I've seen Travis's work for years, actually literally over a decade, when he was working on The Bean. That's why we start there. But Life at the Party has definitely given Travis a new lease on life, and that's where we talk about his new creations and how he's evolved, and it's great. I really got to enjoy this opportunity. Travis is an amazing creative talent. He's an amazing human being as well. And I do think, he's becoming more appreciated in his career, and he deserves it because he's worked his ass off to get to this point. But I know what you're wondering. Why is this 370 and not 369? Well, 369 is currently up, and it was live on Sunday. Sophia Evangelina was my guest. Sophia... It's still one of my favorite interviews, actually. I really enjoyed it. It was a great experiment. Technically speaking, I learned an awful lot about Zoom. There are some things I would do differently on the technical level, but the content was incredible. Sophia carries herself like a superstar. She really does, and you can see it when you actually watch the Zoomcast. It's incredible. My two favorite things: she bopped to her own song, which I think is awesome. It's cool that an artist is into their stuff. But the other thing I really enjoyed about that was how she answered her question for 1 year later, her vision for 1 year from now, because that was so much fun. But anyway, we'll get into 369 will air as a podcast this weekend. But for now, let's just enjoy our conversation with Travis, shall we?
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indy Imprint. Indy Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indy Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indyimprint.com.
Yeah. People don't always understand that.
Okay, I just turned the recorder on, so now we can get to the really incriminating stuff. It's all good. No, I just figured just let you know, just to let you know. No, it's weird because for me, all I'm seeing is like, and I this might sound like the craziest thing. Look at all the opportunities that are here right now, and it just that might sound like completely crazy, but I look at it like. There's a biblical verse that came to mind when this started to when everything started to hemorrhage, which is for the new to come, the old must pass. So regardless of whatever happens going forward, like there's going to be two parts to this crisis: the epidemic, which is right now, or the pandemic, I should say. It's not an epidemic, a pandemic, and then there's the economic fallout that's going to happen afterwards. Well, what's going to happen there is a lot of things that we've taken for granted for the last, even decades are just going to completely tumble. But that's the nature of change. Things wash away when their time is up. And I'm like, well, okay, but the new things are going to have to be built. And I had this conversation with Dave Butler a little bit. Anybody that has the ability to be mobile right now actually has a huge advantage, because there's going to be these opportunities that can kind of come from anywhere, and if you have access to those things, right, you might create something new by accident right now, which I think is amazing.
I think it's definitely a good place for creatives to be.
Yes.
I think also that the economy will probably bounce back quicker than we realize. I'm not as watching our area and seeing how things are working, it's funny. The media will tell you one thing, and then you go outside and you see something totally different.
Absolutely, especially the American media is the absolute worst for that.
Where we've seen it, where we want to support a local restaurant or something of that nature, and it just seems that a lot of people are banding together to figure out ways to help, and I think I don't know what the future will be for conventions, so that is going to be the big thing, or big sports events. I think it will eventually return to normal. I just think that people will have to get back into a state of just more of an awareness of what they're doing. Once we get some checkpoints in place, a lot of people that are not working right now, they're basically on hold with their company. Their company has said, okay, file for unemployment and then come back. We'll reach out to you in a couple of months. It happened to my son, actually. He's in that position.
Yep.
So I think that once we get through this, it'll be all right. And this actually isn't the first time that, as a nation or a society has been shut down. And you look at the flu pandemic in the early 1900s.
Absolutely.
They shut everything down in situations, and I hear people all the time go, "Well, it was different. It was different." And actually, in a way, it might be different that they didn't have social media, but the anxiety was still the same.
Oh, absolutely.
You were going to work or eat or anything else, and during World War II, my wife's parents or grandparents were in a situation where they didn't know if they were going to come home to a house.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, it's uncertain. Like, it's an uncertain time, but the flip side for me was, it's always really like, I never fully believe there's any such thing as actually real security. Everything changes constantly all the time, and
Exactly.
if anything, this emphasizes that point that much more, that things are going to change at some point, whether you want to them or not. And I think on a mental health perspective, not necessarily a physical health perspective, it's about how you can roll those punches, when they come your way. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I look at it this way. When I first went the route of freelance, I learned, I thought I had a secure job. I thought I had security. I thought I had all these things, and all of a sudden it was gone. And it was that stark realization that I can only be secure in one thing, and that's my relationship with God. That's about it.
Yep.
Everything else is up in the air. Everything else can change. Everything else will be whatever it will be. And my philosophy has always been, I cannot control the circumstances that I'm in, whatever they might be, but I can control how I choose to react.
Yes.
And by that, it will either change the circumstances that I'm in, or if I choose to just wallow in that whatever misery I might be in at that moment, I will just go deeper into a darker place and never change. And
yeah, no, I learned that one. I learned that one the hard way. Like, when I was going through my real hard time, I understood why I was so angry. I looking back on it, I get it. I think anybody would have been, but I stayed there way too long, and that was my mistake the first time. And this time around, it was just easy. I just, those 5 stages of grief, I went straight into acceptance. Well, this is the way it's gonna be. Let's do it, right? And that's it, because it's you can't be mad when the rain falls. You can't be mad at it. It is what it is. You have no control over it. Why worry about that? I mean, I'm not saying don't take it seriously. What I'm saying is, this is the boat we're gonna be in for a while.
yeah, and it's a boat.
Yep.
And there's some big waves, and at the same time, they'll subside, and we'll get some calm seas, and I think we'll see, prosperity again, and I think we'll see all sorts of good stuff. And the power of you inside, what hope you create, what you share. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be aware of what's going on, or that you're not aware. I'm very much aware of the situation. I watch it all the time. But I'm also aware of what my attitude does to other people around me.
Mm-hmm.
I can build people up, and I can say, let's keep moving forward. It doesn't mean I'm not going to have a bad day, because I have those like everybody else. But I get back up.
Yeah.
And I encourage others to get back up. And as a creator and an artist who's worked freelance for many years, I live in hills and valleys. There's sometimes that we got great prosperity, and there's other times where it's like, oh man, are we going to eat this month?
No, you don't know, and it's frightening. It's like, what do I got to do? And I'm literally starting down the road. I figure for me, like, you see what I've been doing on my Facebook page. I've been very, very what I call sneakily positive. Like what I just did, like the book recommendation thing. I deliberately made sure that authors could have to promote other people, because what I'm actually secretly doing is I'm forcing everybody to build each other up.
Well, and that's important. It's kind of like why I do coloring pages.
Yeah.
Whether you support me or not is not important.
Yep.
What's important is that you get something enjoyable to kind of takes some pressure off. We all need to have a little bit of pressure taken off.
Yeah.
Also that realization that, the other thing I noticed on social media, period, when you post a rant or you're angry about something like a neighbor or you complain about a situation, and I understand that's part of the grief system, you're getting it out. That you can be angry is all you want. But it hasn't fixed the problem. In fact, if you want that person to see it, they're probably not even following you, so they're never even going to see it or know that they need to change. If you want someone to change, you should actually go and talk to them.
Yep.
And go, hey, let's create change, or this is what I noticed, and if you need help, can I help you? Instead of going, yeah, I can't believe so and so did this, and why are you doing that? You're basically, you need a vent spot, but pretty soon everybody, all they see is you complaining, and I kind of just start avoiding you, because that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear, I understand that times are tough, let me help you, but at the same time, I want to hear your successes. I want to hear that little light of ray that you had, and what was that small blessing that you had, and if it meant that you had a meal that day, that's a blessing.
Yes, it is.
That's an opportunity, and that's kind of how I treat just everything in general. I'm looking at it as, what are those blessings? What are those things that are good for me? What's going to happen? And the more I can look at things with a very positive feel to it, the better off I feel inside. And at the same time, I'm at peace with what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not worried.
I'm in a very fortuitous situation right now because I went back home, partly to make sure they were okay, but I'm also, it takes care of me too. I'm in a really good situation like that way right now. I would have been good anyway it would have gone. But this way it makes me, I don't have to worry about anything for a little while. And so what I'm trying to do going forward too, I had a good advice from a good friend. He goes, the two best advices as a freelancer, one I'm not completely sold on, but the second one I completely agree with, which is you gotta treat things like you have an abundance at all times. There's an abundance thing going on, and everything you should do in terms of what you, at least publicly, you can have your bad days, but publicly you should always try to have an abundance personality. So today what I did was, somebody needs some help, and they're doing some really cool greeting cards, so I bought some greeting cards because I could help them, right? One of my favorite comic shops in Calgary, Alberta is going through a hard time, but they're doing delivery right now, so I'm like, hey, listen, I'm looking for these comics, can you deliver them? Because I'll buy some right now, right? Because that helps you out. And right now, like I said, I just mentioned this, I'm asking authors to give me their list of books. Now, I'm not going to buy all of them because I can't, but I'll pick a handful of different ones. I'll be like, hey, listen, I'll buy them. I'll help you out, right? And let's just practice that whole concept of abundance. Because if I'm able to give, I'm not coming at things from a point of view of scarcity. Because again, the mind's a very powerful thing. So if I put out that there's an abundance of opportunities, those opportunities will come my way. And if I'm helping people now, you know what? Maybe at some point down the road I will need help. It will be there in return, right? It's a good... I'm trying to keep myself as mentally healthy as possible right now.
Oh yeah, that's super important, and that's actually a principle of success anyways.
Yes.
Even in when times are good, if you have that chance to lift somebody up without expectation.
Yeah.
A lot of times we go into, I helped you, I expect something in return. Give me gratitude, give me this, give me that.
Doesn't work that way.
Well, that doesn't work. It actually it's very hollow.
Yeah.
And it's easy to quit. But when you give without an expectation, regardless of where they're from, or how they walk, or how they choose to do things in life, and you're very genuine about it, then you will find fulfillment. Then you find a level of peace that a lot of people struggle or look for. And I've also find that by doing that, you find that the windows, we call it the windows of heaven, actually start to open up in a way. And I love that ability. I don't always know what's going to happen next, but I know that as our family is willing to alleviate a burden here and there as we can, if we can, and share sometimes and just be there for people. And sometimes all people need is a shoulder. They don't need a problem fixed. They just need to be listened to. And I walk away going, all right, what did I get out of it? And then I start to realize that I kind of saved a little bit of my own heart.
Yeah.
You know, I healed a little bit of my own chaos that I deal with all the time.
Well, most people don't always realize that when you actually give, you are getting something in return. Whether it's not necessarily a physical thing, but you do get something out of it. You're helping somebody, and you're feeding a part of yourself that shows compassion and empathy towards others, and it benefits in the long run. Because again, when I went through my hard times, I never forgot who helped me ever, right? And I've always make it a point that when I'm succeed in something, I thank everybody that helped me, because I don't do things on my own. And I've learned it's very important lessons. I have like 6 rules. I have 6 rules in my head. I had 8, but right now 6 seems to be where I'm at. And the 6 rules: be grateful, be charitable, right? Because it's one of those things where gratitude goes a long way, and I learned this when I quit my job. That when I thanked people for that, I realized it's one of the most powerful 2 things you can do to somebody. If you mean it, thank you and I love you are the most powerful 2 things you can say to someone, if you mean it. So.
But,
Yeah. So, Mr. Travis, I have known of you, and I've seen you off and on throughout the years at Comic-Cons. So, when I was working for James Owen, he recommended you. And then I followed you. You do some really kick-ass stuff, man. You do some great stuff.
thank you.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about The Bean a little bit? Because that's where I knew you. That's where I met you. The original novel, and kind of where you've evolved, how you've evolved since.
Well, Bean is kind of in a weird holding pattern at the moment. It's actually, there's talks with a publisher to make it work, and we're trying to figure out all the schematics and such. And I think this whole scenario right now is kind of put it on hold for me to go back and finish it. I really enjoyed the story, and it's very niched, though. I find it very niched, so it's hard sometimes to make that a functional stream of income, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm a big proponent of going out and doing your own thing, following your dream, writing the books that you want to read, and it's also recognizing when, that there are multiple different versions of stories that kind of need to be told, and figuring out how to do it. So Bean, I'm in basically close to finishing the 5th book, and it's been a wild, fun ride. But it's been kind of, like I said, in this holding pattern for the last little while, just as we figure out what's the next step, how do I bring it on. And by allowing someone else to take over it, I think would allow me to continue to work on it and stay focused on it, which is a tough thing to do. I've created a new property right in the middle of this that has been the biggest property I've ever done in my life. And so that's what's actually putting food on the table compared to The Bean, which is more of a labor of love that it's like, okay, one day I'll finish it. And
Well, it happens though. I mean, we start out. I think one of the things we all start out with as creators, we write about what we're passionate about, and we should, because that's where our voice is strongest. But as we become better storytellers, because that's what our passions teach us a lot about how we tell our stories. Then what there comes a point, it's like, okay, I've done my, and this isn't quite true, because I know your new property is still art, but I've done my passion, right? How can I make this and turn this to food on the table, right? And at some point, and sometimes that means, and I've seen this with like people like Colleen Doran, she shifts into doing other work, because lessons she learned in her passion projects have allowed her to gain like work otherwise. And it sounds like maybe that's what happened with you.
Well, yes and no. I think that it's just learning to find out what you get passionate over and what time you have. I like working on indie games for other companies and indie books. I'm working on 3 games right now for 3 other companies, and I'm working on a comic book for another company. And I still are able to do some of my own projects, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Yeah.
But I have found that, when looking at this, and looking at this in a way that's a little different, is a lot of times people want to create or write a book. They want to write what they feel the world needs to hear. This is the story that you need to hear this, you need to hear it. And to me, that's wrong. Those books don't sell. It's the book that you wanted to read as a 10-year-old is the book that's going to sell for you, because that's where your heart is. And you can have your heart in multiple spots. I have my heart in the Bean, but my heart's also in Life of the Party in a way that it has never been for a project. Because I grew up playing role-playing games. I grew up in that whole world of RPGs, and all of a sudden I'm allowed to give a little bit of my love back to that in a way that has been very rewarding for me. And so I find that as you start to move on, things kind of move and change and adjust a little bit, and that's completely okay. Even Life of the Party is going through a changing process in its own little way. Not a bad process, it's just evolving into something different. I realize that there's more I want to do with it. And, where as a creator, I think sometimes our biggest drawback is we're either too married into the project where we put blinders on and we can't see anything else, or we're too, I'm not going to say not committed, but it's easy to get lost or bounced around. Now, there has to be some sort of monetary connection with whatever project you're working on to a degree after a while, just so that you can keep doing it. It doesn't mean that it has to pay all the bills. What it means is it needs to cover the expenses of that project. So if you're doing conventions and stuff and selling the Bean, and the Bean's the only thing I'm selling, it has to pay for the shows. Well, if it's not doing that, then that teaches me or tells me that I need to go back and change the project a little bit, revamp a couple of things, figure out how to make it move differently. And that's sometimes a hard thing. The thing that I think with Bean that was the hardest, and I have people that argued on both sides, was that it's black and white and not a standard comic format. So when I started to go into color, it really changed it. But as a one-man show, that's pretty taxing.
Yes.
I've only got so many hands. And then all of a sudden, I get roped into this great 5-day-a-week comic. and my whole career changed.
Yeah.
And for the better.
So
you just have to really kind of sit down and go, it's okay to make changes. It's okay to go back to projects. It's okay to put projects down. Eventually I'll come back to it and finish it off.
how has your voice changed, Neil? Like, you know what I mean? But just from a novel writing.
Well, I aged, so my voice changed a little that way.
What I mean by that is, this is what I found. This is what I found with specific novel projects. Unless you're really, really immersed, and let's say it's a multi-book or multi-part series, that might be a little different. I'm getting into that right now, and I'll figure out what that looks like on the other side when I'm done. But what I find is when I have an idea, I have like a window of about 3 years, because whoever I change as a person so much that the voice I had at 3 years ago is not quite the same voice I had 3 years from now, because I'm wiser, I'm sharper, but I'm also, because of what I've learned, I'm not necessarily the same person I was when I started, right? So what I mean by that is, like, you've been invested in your projects for a long time, so maybe it works a little differently for you. But I've noticed that voices do change in your story, and sometimes it changes how you tell it. And what have you noticed has changed possibly in the last few years with you?
Well, so I turned 49 this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And when I started writing and working on The Bean in its first incarnation, I was in my 20s. And as a 20-year-old, I saw life completely differently. I really did. I mean, there's elements that run through the whole thing. just how I see things and how I want things, and what was important and what moved me. The older I get, you can say the little bit wiser I get over things that are happening in the world. Whatever struggles they might be, whatever adventures they could be. I see there's so much out there that you really start to step back and go, okay, what I thought was important in my 20s is not as important as is in my late 40s. It's a whole different vibe. And your writing changes too. My humor's still there, and I still look at things differently, but I find myself going, well, I'm not as aggressive in certain areas as I used to be in my writing. I'm not as aggressive in topics, in certain topics, while other topics I get far more aggressive. I really see a change of heart as I age, of going, wow, maybe I was wrong in some of my thinking when I was younger, and that's okay. So you're allowed to be that. And it really starts creating some interesting soul searching inside, and you figuring out, well, how do I make that work? How do I get it out there? How do I change what's going on around me? And it flows into your writing. Even now, I look at my artwork. My artwork was geared to, when I would draw, watching my kids play. My kids are all old now, and now they are having kids of their own, and now I'm watching my grandkids through TV right now. But I get to see them play and see where their imagination goes and stuff. So it gets rekindled a little bit, but I definitely see a change in what's important and what's not.
Yeah.
You start to realize that status, power, stuff like that's really fleeting. Rewards aren't that important. Sometimes what's important is just getting the voice out, or just creating something that you feel good about. I've actually stopped even caring about awards. They're not that important to me anymore. It's not, I'm just looking at going, well, what's in my head? What's the story that I want to tell? Or what's the picture that I want to draw? Or whose heart? How do I want to touch someone's heart? And now I'm finding a whole different level of creativity that I never knew existed. Even when I work on projects, I'm working on a huge monster manual right now. I'm having a blast with it because as we sit down, I'm starting to analyze it from a whole different perspective than I would have when I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Your 20s, you're going, oh, I'm going to draw superhero style, and I'm going to make it look like this and have this feel. In reality, no, as you get older, you start going, well, I want to be a little bit more distinguished, or a little bit more different, a little bit more, I want to be a lot more creative or rounded as a designer or an illustrator.
Sounds to me like your voice, in a way, has gotten pure. Like you've gotten to the point where you know who you are as a creator, and you know what you care about, and so it's like, okay, so what story do I want to tell here, and how best do I tell that story? And sounds like you've stopped worrying about pretty much anything else, unless there's maybe a specific reason for it. Is that about right?
To a degree. It's just my concerns are changing.
Mm-hmm.
What's important. I think the biggest realization that I came to, or I see right now, is life's a journey, a road. And it is a road that moves very quickly. Mm-hmm. And you can either do something on that journey, or you don't have to do something on that journey and miss out on whatever opportunity that you might have had. And I think it's also the realization that has really solidified a lot of my thought process is people have choices, regardless of who they are. People have different belief systems. Everybody is unique. And I look more at as I go to conventions and I meet different people and I talk to different people and different creators, and I realize how different we all are on the outside, and how when we are different, and there's moments that people have come to my table and I can just think of the first thing going, oh my gosh, is this guy going to kill me or what? And then all of a sudden we're talking and then connecting, and then I realize that, oh my goodness, our hearts are similar. we have this similar feel inside. And as I see more and more connections that way, and realizing that the human family literally is one family, I'm becoming a lot more, I think, I'm stepping back more in what I choose to say about others or how I look at others. I'm trying to be more going, okay, they are an individual with the same emotions I have. What are they dealing with? So I can understand them better. So that as we communicate and talk and create or have an interaction of sorts, we have an interaction that's general without prerequisite opinions and such.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I still don't judge. Everybody judges. But I'm learning to get past that. And I think that's hard for sometimes, when you're writing your voice, you brought that up. I think that gets hard for people sometimes to distinguish that. They want to write their opinion. They want to write their, this is how it is, and in reality, it's not how it is. There's so many differences out there, and so many people just trying to survive, and it's just like, well, how do I be part of that?
No, that's my dad. He just walked in. Just like, are you done? It's like, no.
No problem. It's all good.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. So when I started this podcast, which was kind of by accident, I had this opportunity.
The best ideas start by accident.
They do. They really do. I've learned a long time ago to embrace your accidents because they're the best. They're the best things. And what I've learned is that I had to let go of a lot of my preconceived notions of people when I started this podcast, because I had the opportunity to meet so many different kinds of people from every walk of life on the planet. And I could do one of two things. I could let my judgments get in the way of what could be an amazing once-in-a-lifetime conversation, or I could have an open mind and let it go, because it doesn't really matter what I think or what I feel. It's the important thing here is I'm with this person who has done this amazing thing, and I could learn something from them. I can understand the world better through them, because again, it's different than me. I might disagree with how people do things, but the reality is it doesn't really matter what I think. They're doing what works for them, and that's cool. Why does it work for them? Let me understand. And sometimes when I did that, I've started to understand so many different perspectives on how the world works, and it's like, you know what? I don't condemn anybody anymore. I just don't. I don't have it in me, right?
So that's the key when you're creating, is how do you take that newfound knowledge,
Yeah.
that newfound deal of the differences within people, and put that into your story. And all of a sudden, these characters no longer become one-dimensional characters. They become extremely dynamic, or extremely versatile, or full of, I call it shades of gray.
Yeah.
I don't believe anybody's black and white.
No one is. No.
I believe everybody lives in shades of gray to some degree or another. Some degrees are a lot more wider than vice versa. But how do you put that in your stories? How do you put that into your cartoons? How do you put that into your work? And I think it's possible. I think it's completely possible to put that in there. It's just, how do I do it?
Yeah.
And that's where the key is. I think there's some great writers out there and some great storytellers that have figured that out. They're able to put all the diversity that they can within the story, one, without it being forced, and two, they create a natural flow of storytelling, which, it's pretty awesome to read. I think when you force an idea, or you force something into a book, you can tell that it's forced. Even with a relationship, it drives me nuts when the fans go, oh, well, we want so-and-so and so-and-so to be together. And they force the author to put them together however they do it, verbally or writtenly or whatever. And all of a sudden, the story is no longer the author's, which to me, I think, takes away the power of the story. So it's learning to grab all of that information and put it into one spot.
I think one of the hardest things to keep grasp of is authenticity. It's a very, very tricky line, because you want, again, when we talk about diversity, you want to be as naturally inclusive as you know how to be, right? but you do, again, like you said, you don't want it to feel forced. You want it to feel like it naturally fits in this story. And the cool thing is, if you do it right, the audience will buy anything. In my novel, I mentioned dragon flu, even though it's not like just because I could, or I mentioned it right off the bat. The first editor I had look at it, she goes, you know what? I completely bought it. It was just, in this world, this is possible. So I completely bought it. It's like, yes. And so, but I'm trying, like, the second book's a lot harder because I'm looking at, I'm dealing with talking about gender identity a little bit. And it's not something I fully understand. Right? So because of that, I'm being very careful with how I put it in the story, because I don't want it to feel inauthentic. I don't want it to feel like I'm forcing it. I want it to feel like it should be there. And I find that's a really tricky, again, because I don't fully understand it and I'm still researching and doing all kinds of stuff on it. I don't fully have my voice figured out on it. So I'm being very careful, right? Because again, it's a part of diversity, it's part of today that wasn't part of it when I grew up, or to the same degree when I grew up, but it's part of the world, and I would be naive not to include it in some form or fashion, right? It's the world we live in today, and I'm like, yeah, I always believe that art should reflect life in some way. Does that make sense?
It does. For me, it's just I just do what I like.
Yeah, no, and that works too. Hey, you know what? That's actually probably maybe the truest way, right? What do you like to do? So I'm going to ask you a hard question, an evil question. Are you ready for an evil question?
You can ask me anything you want.
So what's your favorite thing to draw?
My favorite thing to draw?
Yeah, what do you like to draw more than anything else?
I love organic fantasy.
Nice.
Where there is a little bit of an apocalyptic feel to it, with robots or something hidden within the ground, and life reclaiming. I love trees and mountains, watching different things. There's something about nature. I like drawing nature.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. And I love drawing movement. Character movement. There's just something about that. I think that's where my passion is. I'll give you what I hate drawing too.
Sure.
I hate drawing cars.
What bars?
Cars.
Oh, okay, yeah. They could be a pain. They could be a real pain.
Well, because I think there's more of a rigid. It has to look more like a car. It has to be rigid. When I draw a landscape, it's all landscape. It's all wild and different and unique, and I prefer that. So that's what I would rather draw.
So note to self: if I ever ask you to collaborate on something someday, make sure it's all kinds of forests and stuff, and we'll make cars completely evil. All right?
Well, yeah, I'll put I'll draw it, and I can.
Yeah, well, but I mean,
it's just not on my top 10 list of going, oh yeah, I'm gonna draw that.
It's like, yes, no. It's like, no. It's like, why?
I mean, I also dig, like, people ask me what I like to draw. I like to look at life, and I go, how do I take that ordinary object and make it fantastic?
Yeah.
Or put it in a fantastic setting. I like that surrealism.
Nice.
It doesn't have to be connected.
No.
Or grounded. I like having a sense of being able to distinguish that it's embedded a little bit in reality, but in the most part it's not.
Yeah, no.
I think that's what makes powerful storytelling for me.
I actually find that the best stories, the stories I enjoy the most anyway, have that sense of unreality to them. It actually makes me easy. For some reason, it makes it easier for me to enjoy it, like to walk right in, because there is that sense of wonder, and I think that's what I really love about stories with that wild sense. It's just like there's a sense of wonder and magic and terror, but it's something you can almost distance yourself from and just enjoy the ride for what it is. So
a good example would be the lamppost in C.S. Lewis's book. It's just sitting in the forest. It's a great image, and people don't even realize how great that image is. So why is it there? And yeah, he explains it a little bit in one of the other books in his series, but at the same time, it's just there, and that's what I love. I don't care how it got there. The fact that there's a working lamppost in the middle of a forest is amazing to me. When you read, as you look at some of the other books, Terry Brooks is another great example of someone that he would, in his earlier books, before you figure out exactly where Shannara is, there's hints of the old world, and there's places and things, and it allows your imagination to go, I wonder where that is.
Yeah.
I can almost see it. I can almost believe that I've been there, and I think that is important and awesome ways of doing things story-wise. And man, it would be great to see, when a writer is able to incorporate that element into it. It's like, oh wow, you're merging, and I love that. I have a friend, I've got several friends that they spend so much time, writing these quote fantasy books built on all this high fantasy that it has to have a rigid structure, that they're missing the point of what fantasy really is. It's surreal. It can be anything.
And that's always the best ones. I helped somebody, like somebody was worried so much about their world, but it's like, don't worry about that. Just tell your story. Just tell your story, and let that fit, and then fit your world around the story you're telling. And
the world will build itself around it.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be as crazy and wonderful as you want it to be afterwards, and you can add some stuff. I think my favorite example of that though was Robert Jordan. He would tell these like little like mythical stories inside the Wheel of Time that reflected like our time a little bit, like it's like the first trip to the moon and all that, and the Age of Legends is like, man, that's so cool. He's referencing all these other points in history and time in a really fun way. Not your thing?
Oh, I like it. I totally agree. I was just nodding with you.
Yeah, okay. I thought there was a grimace there. Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking through a Zoom lens, so it's one of those things. I misunderstood the interpretation there. No, but there's a lot of cool things you can do in fantasy. I'm becoming more and more a fan of young adult fantasy as I get older and wiser, because I feel like here's what I feel like. I feel like one of the things going forward is how we tell a story also impacts the medium we tell it in, and I love that young adult takes chances on that. I feel more so than a more traditional book. Hugo Cabret is a good example of it. I just love the fact that book is one part picture book, one part novel, and it merges together in such a cool way. You wouldn't see that in an adult book, but you see that in YA, and you're going, I always go when I see stuff like that, that's so cool. That was so much work, but that was so cool. It was worth it. And I hoping as we get more and more, as mediums become more and more merged, I feel like hopefully we're going to see more and more of that kind of experimental storytelling.
Actually, it's already there.
Yeah.
The whole set of indies.
Yes.
The indie writers are doing it. The indie cartoonists are doing it. The indie comic guys are doing it.
Yes.
They're doing stuff that nobody else is willing to try because they have nothing to lose.
Yes.
It just falls on their shoulders. And there's a huge group out there that's producing some of the best storylines I have ever seen that are not mainstream. You should sit there and
you should mention them. You should mention them.
Well, I will. The thing is it's just finding them and going out and look. If you look at Brian Kessinger, he does Octavia. What a great book. You would never find that published anywhere else, and I think he kicked that. You look at stuff by Steam Crow, same thing. They're doing all this fantastic stuff that you just don't see anywhere else. These are these independent creators that are producing work that's fantastic. Dane Alt did some great work. He did a children's book that was based on scientists. And
nice.
It's awesome. It's absolutely one of the coolest books that I've ever seen that deal with these different scientist elements and stuff like that. So he took his passion and he put it into the book. You have other people that are also like, you look at Jeff Smith of Bone.
Oh yeah.
Bone's a fantastic. He just wrote what he wanted, and it's great because you can feel it all the way through the book.
Yes.
So you have all of these other creators out there that are building stuff that's different that you just don't see anywhere else. And the goal is finding them. And you can't really find them sometimes online. They just you get lucky occasionally because there's so much content online. But you find them at shows. You find them at these conventions, and that's why these conventions are important. is they allow the indie creators to actually have a kind of an equal footing in a way if they want to, or if they're willing to put the effort in to make it work.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot out there that's just waiting to be found, and the key is finding it and such. I like it when I see other creators on Facebook, but there's a problem with this too. A lot of times creators follow creators.
Yes.
And we go, hey, list another author or artist that you like and let's support them. So basically we are catering to each other. And that's kind of hard because we're all trying to do the exact same thing.
It's a real challenge actually finding readers because yeah. Sorry, keep going.
You want to break that. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. You want to break that. You want to get past that. And that means you have to step out of your audience that you think your audience, because we think that each other's creators are our audience, when in reality they're not.
No.
They're all married to their own projects. So when you're willing to step out and start moving into some of the different forums and different groups that are more in the genre of what you're trying to write, or that appreciate that kind of artwork or fiction or whatever, then you start to see a growth in your characters.
Yes. And which is really sound advice. It's something I'm doing right now. Just getting started, because I realize I cater to a lot of creators with my podcast, right? But I also I also have a listening base as well, and I'm trying to expand that listening base beyond. I've started to succeed beyond creators, but I want to keep it growing. And to do that, I have to go out there, and I have to put myself in areas where. That's not that creators aren't there, but they're not what I'm feeding right now. I'm feeding what niches I'm trying to serve, and I think that's a very important thing that a lot of especially independent creators, they don't do enough of.
Well, it's kind of hard when you're the jack of all trades and you have to do everything. It does wear on you. We don't have clones.
Exactly.
And we see how clones kind of don't work with like multiplicity and stuff. The next clone's always got something off. So as much as I would love to have a clone of me, I don't know if I could, because he'd be a little off. And I think that approaches with us too. It's just hard to do it all.
Oh, absolutely.
People are dying to give me suggestions. You need to do this with your website. You need to do this. You need to do this. Oh, I know I need to do all that, but I can't, because I'm working on a piece to get back up that you can enjoy the comic on the next day. So eventually I'll get there, but at the moment I can't bring other people on, because we work for us.
Yep.
And so that becomes a struggle and such. But once we get past that, it makes things a little bit more easier to allow people to get into our world. And I have found, like I said, the minute I kind of left and went out into the genre that I was working in, things started to open up for me. My audience all of a sudden was no longer always other creators. It was actual people that were buying the material. And that's a much more stronger and important audience to have. Now, it doesn't mean that I have creators that I associate with and follow. In fact, I really enjoy those connections, and I always look forward to talking to new creators. It's just that realization that those creators, just like me, are married to a project they're trying to get out, and they're putting as much effort as I am. So I can't always. I have to be careful how I say this. You can't always support the next creator in hopes that he will support you. Does that make sense?
No. It makes total sense. Like, it's something we said at the very beginning. Creators are married to the work. That's just the way it is. The creators are married to the work, and you can't fault the creator for not going out of their way to support you, because they have their own challenges, and they have their own things they got to do. And all of us have the same, like, I call it the money time conundrum, right? Sometimes we have all the time in the world, but no money, or we have all the money in the world, but no time. And trying to find that balance for each person is super difficult. And so like you said earlier, yeah, you could do work on some things on your website, but if you're doing that, you're not creating a comic which puts food on the table. So so you're in the situation of money versus time. What is important to you? What are your priorities, right? What matters, right?
Well, in a way, yeah. And I think that it's also, where the focus is. My focus is on my work. My focus is on the comic. It's making sure that there's 5 comics that go up each week.
Yeah.
There's making sure that the story continues on. I make sure that my kids, are taken care of. There's so many different things that pull you in directions. Now, I also am extremely picky on the projects that I choose to support, like Kickstarter projects and stuff like that. I get very picky on that. I like quality. I want to see your best work. I want to see how many projects you've backed. I want to see what you're doing. But if it's not in the genre that I like, it's hard for me to support it.
I'm not mature enough to go on Kickstarter for more than 1 session every 3 months. I'm not mature enough.
But I support projects all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm very choosy. Not everybody that says, "Hey, follow my Kickstarter," I'm like, okay, you need to step your game up.
But you have to be choosy. I mean, here's the other thing too. There's so much good stuff out there. You can't buy it all. As much as you may want to, you just can't. And you have to be picky and choosy. That's why I'm only give myself like once every 3 months I will go on Kickstarter and look around and support something if I feel I can support something. Simply because, frankly, I have an impulse control issue. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to be good. I know my limitations. I'm going to come on once. I'm going to see what I really like. If I like it, I'll support it. And if I don't, I walk away for 3 months, right? And then, but I'll support other people in other ways. I'll do people on Patreon. I'll do what I do with the podcast, and that's my way of supporting creators and helping them out. And I can do that on a regular basis. And like I said, for me, it's starting to be a source of income for me too. So it's like this is where my focus has to be, and so I don't always have time to go. But so I understand what you're saying. Like you have to really pick and choose your priorities, and honestly, there's just so much good stuff out there, and not all of it's for you. Some of it's for other people, and that's a good thing, I think.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Mr. Travis, I think we have an interview here. What do you think?
Maybe you got a good interview, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. So I think what we should do is you should tell people how they can find you, what are you up to right now that people can support right now, and and go from there.
Well, you can, I'm working on Life of the Party all the time right now, and several other big game projects, which I'm having a blast with, and some of those I can share, and some of those I can't. So the 7 Deadly Sins Monster Manual I can share, and that we're in the middle of that, artwork-wise. I'm not going to run a Kickstarter until later on in the year. I just figured that it would be wise to wait. You can find me on beanleafpress.com, or you can just follow me, Travis Hanson, at any Facebook or Instagram. In fact, I'm a lot more on those platforms than I am on anything else, and very active on them, on talking with my community.
All right.
And that's where you can catch me.
All right. Thanks, man.
Anytime. Thank you.
And that was my conversation with Travis Hanson. Travis, you're always welcome to come on my podcast, man. You are awesome. And it was a pleasure to actually have that kind of heart-to-heart on the show. Travis is an incredible... He is a Kickstarter master, I kind of feel, because he's been doing them for so long. But he's got a lot of great campaigns. Always check him out. Life of the Party is his current thing, but he's doing a lot of other things as well. Check out his website for more details. Travis, you're welcome to come back anytime you want, man. Anytime, just let me know. All right, so who's next? Another comic book great, although a more recent one than Travis. Kaylin Smith's going to be my guest this Thursday. Next week is going to be Miranda O and that Chris Carolyn guy, because that Chris Carolyn guy is pretty awesome. And so, and then next week I conclude Chapter 3 of The Cloud Diver. This weekend, though, my first ever live Zoomcast, Sophia Evangelina. I want to thank Sophia, and I want to thank Mila. I want to thank everybody. This has been an incredible weekend for me. To watch my book, I never thought I'd see my book go at 4,059 in books in Canada. For a debut, that's incredible. I did not ever anticipate doing that well on the start. It's come down to earth a little bit after a few days, and you know what, honestly, that's great. I don't mind that. The book did well. And guys, just if you guys want to support this podcast for the next little bit, I'm on Goodreads now. The book's on Goodreads. Review it. Give reviews so that people can see it and read it and know that it's out there. Lance and I worked really, really hard on it, and yeah, I'm proud of it. I really, really am. So thank you guys for an incredible weekend. It meant the world to me, all of it. Either for watching the Zoomcast or for the book launch. Either way, I love you all for it. So thank you very, very much. And that will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a number of different ways. You can subscribe to the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. I'll check maybe as of Thursday I'll be on another platform too. So that's 1. 2, my book The Cloud Diver is available now at Amazon. Any of you are on Amazon right now. Next week it'll be available on Kobo as well. I can't wait. I'm excited for that. Really, really enjoying the exposure the book has. But if you guys really want to support me, when you get it, review the book. If you love the book, let people know about it. I had a lot of fun writing it and a lot of fun doing it. And my newsletter you can subscribe to. I'll be doing some cool stuff. I'll be announcing my winner, my first giveaway, The Cloud Diver there. But I'm announcing my next book release. That's right. I've already got the next book release kind of ready to go. If you guys have listened to this in the past, you know what it is. But if you don't, that's cool. It'll be great to announce it again. My YouTube channel is Joshua Pentellaresco. You can subscribe to that as well. My Twitter and Instagram is at jpentellaresco. Stay inspired, guys. Chase joy, especially now. You got nothing to lose. All right. Talk to you guys soon.
Josh. Shush.